Panic began to spread in the Gulf after satellite images showed the loading berths at Kharg Island without any oil tankers, right at the main exit point for Iranian oil. On May 13, 2026, the signal that triggered the alert was not a speech from Tehran nor a public threat against Washington. It was the emptiness at sea. The terminal that usually receives vessels to load oil appeared idle while a large oil slick was recorded near the island, and the United States maintained naval pressure on traffic linked to Iran. The very reporting circulating in war coverage points to the absence of oil tankers in the images from May 7, 8, and 11 without a clear explanation for the exact cause of the interruption. I'll tell you all about that in a moment, but right now you'll want to be subscribed to the channel to stay well informed, real-time information at the highest standard, journalistic quality you've already seen. With the standard of credibility Milson Alves, Kharg is not just any island for the Iranian regime, it's the heart of Iran's oil. When the ships disappear from there, the message is serious. Either Tehran is trying to protect higher risk vessels, or the terminal is caught between leaks, blockades, fear of attack, and logistical collapse. Reuters reported that satellite images showed a suspicious oil slick between May 6 and 8, near Kharg, Iran's main oil export hub, with an estimated area of about 45 square kilometers. Tehran denied that the leak came from tanks, pipelines, or local loading systems and blamed a non-Iranian ship that allegedly dumped contaminated waste. The evacuation of ships in this scenario hits the regime's most sensitive point. Iran depends on the island to export a large part of its oil, and the international press itself describes Kharg as the centerpiece of Iranian exports. When the terminal runs out of tankers at the loading points, the panic doesn't come only from the military risk. It comes from the possibility of Tehran losing control over its own oil tap. This movement happens while the presence of the United States in the Gulf continues to put pressure on the regime. The United States Central Command stated that in 4 weeks of naval blockade against ships entering or leaving Iranian ports, American forces redirected 67 commercial vessels, allowed the passage of 15 humanitarian support vessels, and disabled 4 ships to ensure the operation's enforcement. This information changes the shutdown's significance in Kharg, since it no longer seems like an isolated incident at sea. It seems to be part of a sequence in which Iran is gradually losing its freedom of maneuver, while Washington chooses when to tighten, where to apply pressure, and even how much to let the regime breathe. At the same time, the signs around the Gulf show that other governments are already preparing for a tougher phase. The news reports indicate that the United Arab Emirates is setting up anti-drone defenses around oil storage areas with steel scaffolding and barriers that are heavier than simple nets. The logic is clear. If oil tankers are moving away from Kharg and energy infrastructure is quickly being protected in other parts of the Gulf, the market understands that the risk is not just theoretical. And then the situation gets a simple interpretation. If Tehran had to move ships away from its main export island, the regime is defending what it still has before losing even more. The image of empty docks in Kharg directly impacts Iran's narrative of strength. A government that claims to control the Gulf, tries to use Hormuz as leverage, and threatens rival ships. It shouldn't be seeing its own terminal fall silent. That's exactly where the panic shows up. It's not the panic of a full-screen explosion. It's a system starting to pull back its most valuable assets in panic because it knows they could become targets, evidence, or losses. Kharg's story helps to understand why this detail can't be treated as insignificant. During the war between Iran and Iraq in the 1980s, the island was seen as the most vulnerable point in Iran's oil infrastructure. A British report notes that Iraqi forces intensified attacks around Kharg in 1984, mainly with air power and naval mines. The Los Angeles Times also reported in February 1988 new Iraqi attacks against the main Iranian oil terminal in the Gulf. At that time, Baghdad was targeting Tehran's war economy because they knew that oil was funding the Iranian resistance. Today, the image of ships disappearing from the terminal evokes the same strategic memory. When Kharg is at risk, the problem is not just military. It's financial, psychological, and political. The difference is that now Iran is not just facing a regional enemy trying to hit its exports. It faces broader pressure with the United States naval blockade, the energy market on alert, Gulf nations reinforcing defenses, and buyers trying to secure passage through increasingly risky routes. In the war of the 1980s, Tehran was still able to disperse some operations, adapt routes, and resist at a high cost. Now every move is seen by satellite, every stopped oil tanker becomes a market signal, and every oil slick at sea fuels suspicions about the safety of the infrastructure. The regime may even try to explain the stain as waste from another ship, but it can't hide the harshest detail. The terminals appeared without the usual tanker traffic. Examples from other nations show why the withdrawal of ships is so frightening. In 2024, attacks in the Red Sea caused oil and fuel shipments to increase by 47 on the longer route around the Cape of Good Hope because companies preferred to spend more time and money rather than expose ships to risk. In Libya, blockades and closures of terminals like Ras Haslanuf and Essaid also showed how internal war can choke exports without having to destroy everything. Another point that made the Iranian regime even more panicked was the movement of American fighter jets sent near the Iranian war zone. And the strongest sign appeared at Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia. In circulating reports, satellite images indicate the arrival of about 15 F-16 fighter jets at the location, bringing the reported number of aircraft of this model to 53 at the base, while planes, cargo aircraft, refueling planes, and B-1B bombers showed activity linked to the Middle East. The latest development reinforcing this climate came from the Air and Space Forces, which reported today that the Pentagon already estimates the cost of operations against Iran at around $29 billion, including, for example, damage to aircraft and refueling tankers at Prince Sultan Base itself. In other words, this base is not just a distant detail. It became a real part of the war, hit, reinforced, and maintained as a pressure point for US air operations near Iran. The arrival of these fighter jets carries weight because it happens on the same day that other military signals are appearing around the Iran crisis. The specialized website Itamil Radar reported today that B-1B Lancer bombers from the United States Air Force continue to carry out long-range missions, departing from RAF Fairford Base in the United Kingdom, heading toward the eastern Mediterranean, repeating a pattern observed in recent days after the ceasefire with Iran. And Reuters also reported today that Saudi fighter jets attacked targets of militias backed by Tehran in Iraq during the war, after drone and missile attacks against Saudi Arabia and other Gulf nations. Washington is not just moving planes to the routine. The United States is keeping fighter jets, bombers, cargo planes, and tanker aircraft in position to prevent Iran from turning the Gulf into a zone open to military coercion. Tehran may try to control the narrative, but it doesn't control the visual impact of the empty docks. Idle cargo sends a message that's hard for the regime to sell as normalcy. Iran built its leverage on the fear of shutting down the Gulf, but now it sees its own export hub exposed, watched, and without the activity that brings in money. I'm Milson Alves, an international affairs specialist, and my purpose is to keep you well informed with the truth every day. The news links are in the video description. Leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and at the end, check out the comments so you can be even more engaged with the Milson Alves community. Next.